Most founders I meet are obsessed with building. But after a decade in the trenches and raising over $75 million, I realized that this approach usually leads to wasting a whole bunch of your time and money. Today, I want to share the MVP frameworks that I teach founders to help them get to traction and validate their assumptions. It's the same set of frameworks that companies like Flipkart, Aether Energy, and Zepto use to validate their market without writing much code at the start. But before we jump into the frameworks, I want you to first understand the purpose of an MVP. It's not to show that you can build a half-baked version quickly. Rather, an MVP is the version of a new product that allows the entire team to validate certain assumptions and learn from their customers with the least amount of effort. It's a build, measure, learn loop. Instead of asking, can we build it? You should ask, should we build it? With that said, let me talk to you about the first set of MVPs you should build, which is all about validating demand. Contrary to what most founders do, hiring an engineer to build an app is not the first thing you should do. Instead, what you really should do is to set up a landing page. Create a website that describes the problem you're solving, and you can even add a sign-up button to add people to a waiting list. The goal is simple: gauge interest and find your audience. And this doesn't even need to be a formal site, by the way. A blog or a WhatsApp group works just as well, as long as it's a place where your customers can find you and you can learn from them. Let me ask you guys something. Have you guys heard about FitShit Health Solutions Private Limited? Probably not, but you may have heard of the brand that came out of the company. The Whole Truth, an Indian clean label food brand focused on radical transparency. But where did the name FitShit Solutions come from? Well, the story here is that Shashank Mehta, the founder of The Whole Truth, spent years writing articles on his blog, FitShit, to share his learnings about fitness and, crucially, to dissect the ingredients list of popular healthy brands. And once he built his audience, he then moved into manufacturing his own protein bars. And guess what? People were already waiting for it. The next kind of MVP that I want to introduce is an evolution of the landing page MVP. I like to call it a fake door MVP because it helps measure intent when users interact with your landing page. Rather than sharing a mega unicorn example here, I want to share something more personal. I want to talk to you about a company that you've never heard of before. It's called Duck and Trust, and it's started by some of my students in my class. Their goal is to be this care platform for the nuclear family sitting in tier 1 cities in India. You can almost think of it as an urban company for all your child's needs, brought right to your home. And when me and my friends were discussing this, the big debate that we had was what service we should start with. Should it be tutoring, meal prep, or full-time care? I told them that rather than debating about it, they should just put all the services on the website. And they did that. And after that, they went on to measure the click-through rates for these different services. This then gave them an indication of which of these services that they needed to focus on first. Oh, and by the way, this MVP approach is not just for startups. Even publicly traded companies like Swiggy uses the fake door MVP a bunch to figure out user intent. For example, when they were getting into the quick commerce space with Instamart, the big question they had was on what PIN codes and localities they should focus on first. Where should they set up their first dark stores? To help make their decision, they put tiles in the app to see if users would even click to order for groceries. Those clicks gave them the data to know exactly which neighborhoods to launch in first. They measured intent without building a single warehouse. Measuring clicks and intent is great, but you know what's a better way to measure demand? Getting users to actually pay for the product in advance. That's right, have people put an advance down for the product. The perfect example of a company that did this was Aether Energy. The founders, Tarun Mehta and Swapnil Jain, could not raise any funding for Aether Energy. They'd worked on a prototype, but not much else. So what they did was they started a pre-order campaign for 25 bikes for just 85,000 rupees each. People booked those bikes, and that gave investors enough confidence to back them on their seed round. Now, pre-orders don't work just with physical products. It works really well with digital products as well. For example, here's a screenshot for an Indiegogo campaign I ran back in 2016, where I hit 6 times my initial target. And I only created my product, which was a course, by the way, after I met my target. So yes, collect money in advance wherever possible. Oh, and just so you're aware, from my experience, the only time when a pre-order campaign wouldn't work is if there are very close substitutes to what you're selling. Because why would a user buy your product or service versus what's already out there? The last time of MVP that you can build to validate demand is to make a video. And the global classic here is Dropbox. Building a prototype of a file syncing service was almost the equivalent of building the entire product. It's a really, really challenging technical problem to solve. So the founder, Drew Houston, did something way smarter. He made a 3-minute screencast of how it would work. And to impress Paul Graham and other YC partners, he made this video with a ton of Easter eggs for the Hacker News community and then posted it there. The video went viral and the waitlist grew to 75,000 people overnight. That was enough proof for Paul Graham to accept him into YC. He validated a multi-billion-dollar idea with a video and 0 production code. Kind of crazy, right? So we've gone over 4 different frameworks to validate demand. But the reality is that there are situations where the demand is pretty obvious. The real thing that needs to be proved out is whether you can service the demand. And I have 2 MVP frameworks here that help you do just that. The first one is the Wizard of Oz MVP. To the user, the entire product looks automated and seamless. But behind the curtain, it's pure human manual labor. Believe it or not, Flipkart started exactly like this. In 2007, it was just an online bookstore. When an order came in, the founders would literally go to local distributors, buy the book, and ship it themselves. They used human-powered operations to test if Indians would even buy books online before they invested millions in tech and logistics. My friend Raghav Chandra, the CTO and co-founder of Urban Company, shared his MVP story with my class, and that was also similar. Raghav had built the front end of the original Urban Company application that received requests from users on what they needed. His co-founders, Varun and Abhiraj, then scoured through Facebook and other directories to find service professionals who could do the job. And now they're a $2 billion publicly traded company. Kind of cool, right? The next MVP framework I want to introduce is what I like to call the Concierge MVP. It's similar to the Wizard of Oz MVP, but the big difference is that you don't hide the human. The human is the product. The perfect example of this was HealthifyMe. In the early days of building the company, the founders were manually calculating calories in Excel sheets for people on WhatsApp. By doing that manual work, they understood exactly what data points mattered to Indian users. And they only built the app and all the cool AI after they had done the manual concierge work for hundreds of users. Zepto, by the way, did the exact same thing. They started as a WhatsApp group where the founders personally delivered groceries for people in their building. The app came well after. By doing these manual things, these companies were able to figure out what mattered to their users and built their entire company accordingly. This in turn gave investors more confidence to put money into the business because A, the founders could speak convincingly about the market, and B, they had already created happy customers who could vouch for their service. All right, we're in the home stretch here. Every single MVP framework I walked you through so far doesn't really require much of a functioning product. You can validate demand and even service customers using manual labor and simple tools that are already out there. But will this work in all markets? I really wish the answer were yes, but in some industries like banking, healthcare, or premium consumer goods, you just have to ship out a polished product to gain user trust. In these spaces, you need what I like to call a minimum lovable product. Take a look at Jupiter Money or Buy Money. Because these companies are dealing with your money, they couldn't just launch an ugly app and hope people used it. Both these companies started with a beautiful UI with delightful animations and even sleek metal cards. They knew that the experience is the real product. But that said, if you look closely, you would notice that both these companies basically launched a very well-designed savings feature. They wanted to make sure they could get people to use this new banking app before they invest in other product lines like loans, mutual funds, and credit products. So while it took a lot of effort to build the first version, it was still very much an MVP for them. For people who watch this video so far, you're probably those founders who want to build a big business without burning a ton of capital. And one of the questions you might have is, what kind of an MVP should you use? The reality is that you might need more than one type of an MVP to validate different aspects of your business. I'd like to think of everything we've discussed so far as a pyramid. Level 1 is all about validating demand, and this is where things like landing pages, fake doors, pre-orders, and video MVPs fall. Level 2 is about validating the service. Visitor pause and concierge MVP fall in this category. Level 3 is about validating experience. Minimum lovable products fall in this category. My advice is to start at the bottom and move up only when you validated the layer below. Each level usually costs more money and more time, but teaches you a different lesson. Building a startup is a game of survival. And the best way to survive is to stop building things that nobody wants. Use these frameworks to find the truth for your startup before you spend your capital. I'm Rohit Salim, and I hope this helps you build something that actually matters. I'll see you in the next one.